Do you ever get tired of just sacrificing all the time? You're constantly delaying your gratification. You're constantly thinking of the future, thinking ahead, maybe not going out and getting that nicer car that you can afford, but you know that in the grand scheme of things, that money is probably better spent being put into another investment. Well, if that rings home at all to you, that's kind of how I feel all the time. So today, we wanted to talk a little bit about the topic of when is enough, right? Like, when do you get a chance to draw the line in the sand and say, I've sacrificed, I put my blood, sweat, and tears in this thing, and now I'm going to kick back and I'm going to enjoy some of the fruits of my labor. This is a great episode. I think this applies to a lot of people that are ambitious, that want to think bigger. You don't want to just keep taking all the chips off the table, but we're human beings, right? At the end of the day, we want to get some enjoyment out of this thing. So stick with us. This is going to be a cool episode. And as always, we appreciate your support. All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Burn Your Boat's Wealth. We're always wanting to come up with different topics, and it gets to be a challenge. We're 50, 60 episodes in now, and we want to make sure that we're not redundant and we're just talking about the same things. So a lot of times, David and I will have discussions about things that are happening in real time, real life, like what happened to you yesterday. I was on the phone actually, David, with my brother, and I appreciate my brother's opinions because he takes less risk than I do. He thinks that a lot of the stuff I do is probably a little bit crazy. But at the same time, like he understands things and I really appreciate his opinion. And so he told me the other day, he said, Clark, I was telling him about this thing I was investing in or this strategy or, looking to buy some multifamily and stuff like that. And he goes, you are an addict. Like you are a investing addict. Like when is enough enough? Like when are you going to get to the point in your life where you tend to pump the brakes, you don't fly so close to the sun, you don't ride on razor thin margins within your investments. And it kind of struck me, David, is like, God, am I an addict? Like, am I an investment addict where I have to keep chasing that high, and I tend to sacrifice a lot of times a lot of my not necessarily sacrifice my personal life. If a lot of things go wrong at the same time, I could be in a bad position. So today, David, we're going to talk about the topic of when is enough enough.
Such an interesting topic, Clark. It's funny. I think we all know how algorithms put things in front of you that you may have shown even a passing interest in. I do. I don't watch TV at all. I don't really have time for it, but I do try and catch up with little things on YouTube, particularly around real estate. And my attention is taken by this lady who said, like, I was 54 and I was laid off, right? Because I'm always looking for content as well for the show here. And so I'm watching this video of this lady who's 54, and she went into work one day. She'd worked in this company for like 34 years, and bam, by 11 o'clock she's going home. Right. And she's talking about her emotional reaction and how she could either let them have control or she could take control of the issue or the situation herself. And she kind of walks through that. But then because of that, the algorithms think I'm in my mid 50s and then I'm somehow just have to been let go from my job. And the algorithms are putting a lot of this, like getting let go in your mid 50s and whatever. And I clicked on another one just because I thought it was interesting. And there was this guy talking about, like, why do people kind of in their 50s find it so much harder to find a new job? And he was talking about essentially algorithms read your resume, and algorithms are designed not to have age bias within them, right? So you would think, okay, well, the algorithms themselves will eliminate, but then the algorithms will start looking at your skills and looking at your age and have you potentially kept up with your skills. And look, there's loads and loads and loads of 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds who are absolutely up to date and fully plugged into the latest skills. But there's a lot of people, underneath us, me at 53, and people in their 20s and 30s that are using different tools. They approach
Yeah.
life differently, and so there's like skills entropy. Like you just your skills are eroding away, and do people want a 55-year-old man in the office? We're also more expensive in our
Yeah.
50s and whatnot, right? And so I don't think people continue to go to work in a W-2 always because they love it. There are lots of people who love it, right? And we're going to talk about why I think you buy real estate and why you continue to do what you do. But I also want to throw right at the front of this conversation, a lot of people work because they have to, right? And they stop working if you're lucky enough to stop working for a company at a time of your choice, because you've done the right thing, you've saved right, you've invested right, and you're ready to depart your working life at the right age, let's say 65 or something like that, and you've got your financial advisor and you've got $5-10 million or whatever it might be, and you're going to take out 4% a year, so you've got a zero chance of running out of money. That's kind of like a perfect scenario for retirement. And then
Yeah.
people retire and they have it well planned out. But huge amount of people don't have that.
Yeah.
Huge amount of people don't have that. And then there's people who will stay working in that W-2 because they love it. They just genuinely love their job, right? So my first response to you is kind of a mixture of what I've just said, in that I don't think that you're ready to retire financially. I just don't think you can financially retire, walk away into the
No.
sunset. And I'm talking about properly retire. I'm
Yeah.
talking about go away and never have to open a computer, you
Yeah.
know, unless you're booking your next airplane flight,
Right.
right? So being a real estate investor, you're not really, you might not be working all day, every day, but most real estate investors end up in their 60s with sort of kind of large real estate portfolios that they're asset managing. At the very least, they're asset managing them, and
Yeah.
so you don't really get to retire from real estate unless you sell it all or you somehow manage it all. And so I'll throw this back to you. Why do you think you're addicted to buying real estate, or is it a mixture of, well, I'm just not ready to retire, and number two, you just love what you do?
Tough. I think addiction has kind of certainly has a lot of negative connotations, more so. I'd rather be addicted to real estate than heroin, right? So, there's different ways to look at it. When my brother asked me that question, it really made me think, am I addicted? And I don't think, I think that if you have too much of something, and I think that you always want to have some balance, right? And so if you're always an extreme, but at the same time, like I've read different books. I've read Elon Musk's book. I read Phil Knight's book, the owner of Nike, and they are the most extreme cases. They're addicted to the high. They're addicted to the rush of like backs against the wall. You've got an hour to go raise $1 million, or they're gonna do something in a negative way. And so you look at those guys and you're like, well, they are, uber successful at the same time. And I know you've said this before, is like, I don't think I'd want that life. Like, I don't want to be Elon Musk sleeping in the office till like 4 a.m. and then getting on a private plane and flying to an office an hour away and start working. So then it's like, when is enough? Are you an addict? Is it good to be an addict, right? And some, if you're more of a balanced addict, if that makes sense. I don't, maybe that's not even a term, but I know, David, that I've had different conversations, not only just my own thinking, but I heard I can't remember if it was in a mastermind group I was in or something, but it was maybe on a podcast where the guy said, David, I'm worth like $4 or $5 million, like his net worth. And he goes, but I don't feel like I'm worth $4 or $5 million. Like when I was growing up as a kid, if I would have imagined I had $4 or $5 million, I would have this huge house. I'd be like Scrooge McDuck jumping into that big castle of gold coins every morning, waking up. And he's like, I live fairly below my means. I don't have a tremendous amount of cash just sitting around, and yet I'm worth $4 or $5 million. But it certainly doesn't feel like that. And I think that a lot of entrepreneurs have that feeling because you're constantly delaying your gratification. You're constantly not going out and buying the nicest liability, whether that's a car or clothes or the nicest watch, whatever that may be, even though you can't afford it. But if you do keep buying those things, it keeps you from really flipping the penny over and progressing and doubling down on that. So I remember I had a discussion with a guy in a mastermind group up in when I was in Missouri, and I think he had $7 or $8 million worth of like self storage and multifamily, and he's just like, man, I'm just kind of tired. Like, when is enough to where I can draw a line in the sand and say, okay, I'm not going to take every dime of cash flow that I make and then just dump it into the next deal. When do I get a chance to take that cash flow and go on a nicer trip, stay in a nicer hotel, have a nicer meal with my family? And so I hope that a lot of people out here that are kind of maybe going through the same things as listeners that are like, I keep delaying my gratification, but when is enough to where I can actually stop? I can smell the roses and I say, okay, I'm going to buy that. I'm going to treat myself. Give me your thoughts, David. I know that for me, I feel I'm constantly looking at something and saying, I would buy that, but I'd rather take the money and go dump it into a rental property. I'd rather go dump it back into the business to buy a better widget or be able to do something to make our business better. And that's just kind of how my brain works. And I am willing to fly close to the sun. I don't have a tremendous amount of money under the mattress just sitting around. I get scared when I have more than X amount of dollars. Let's say if I have more than 20 or 30 grand, 40 grand, being a single guy with no kids, I don't have a lot of oh shit expenses. Fairly healthy guy. I have health insurance. I just don't have a tremendous amount of expenses. And so I'm willing to just, fly close to the sun and being able to, you know, just constantly churn and put money into new things because I'm hoping that I'm getting smarter with my investing strategies. So the compounding effect of those is better and it's more efficient. It's more effective than it was, say, 3 years ago or 5 years ago. But I do fly close to the sun. It is a bit nerve wracking from time to time. It sometimes there's some sleepless nights where I'm like, oh shit, a $9,000 mortgage payment due, and I've been paying a lot of money for my rental properties that were damaged during the hurricane. And I'm like, that 9 grand mortgage payment wasn't a big deal until I had to spend 100 grand on repairs. And all of a sudden that 9 grand tends to become a higher priority. And there's not as much cash to cover it. So, that is something that weighs on me heavily because I do want to go sit on the beach and retire. But to your point, there's no way I could retire and I would get bored to tears. So, what about you, David? Enough is enough. You're in a slightly different spot. You have 3 kids, you have a wife, you have a wife that supports and is definitely a part of your investing strategy. So, I kind of gave you the single bachelor guy approach. What is your approach?
Right. Well, when is enough enough? Well, you kind of tend when you're younger to start out thinking that that's a number. I have 5 million, 2 million. I can tell you what my goal was a long time ago. When it's a very immigrant thing to say, but my goal was to be able to move back to come here, move back to Ireland, buy a house in a location of my choosing, right, and have $1 million. That was my
There it
goal.
is.
That was
Done.
it. When you're starting from zero, that was the goal. Okay, and that seemed like essentially it's about basically a $2 million goal, right? Like $1 million to be able to buy a house, and $1 million would see you very nicely for a very long time when your costs are as low as they are,
Right.
essentially living in a much lower cost environment than the United States is. So so that was a goal. That was my number. I'm just being very honest about it,
Right.
right? But it's funny how over time we meet those goals, right? And they're like, that was such an innocent goal. I
That's so
can't.
cute.
Well, yeah, right. I wouldn't live for a minute on that stuff. And then we kind of get into this kind of almost wacko world where inflation comes in and changes your goals. So you might say, "Oh, I want 5 million," and then it takes you 7 years or 8 years to hit your 5 million. Let's say they're like, 5 million isn't what it was 5 years
No.
ago, And so my take on when is enough is this: it's a long game. It's not a short game. You're not kind of running to stand still. I've never met anybody who's like racing to a number and then they hit that number and bang, they're out.
Yeah.
Because usually, more often than not, what happens is they start off with a number. It's a very young person's thing to do. Like a number is very comforting. It's a target, right? But then what happens is the journey of hitting that number, you get clever,
Mm.
you start learning things, you start getting more efficient, you start hopefully enjoying more of what you're doing. And so on the journey of hitting your goal, more often than not, you'll find a certain amount of joy and interest in what it is that you're doing. I don't think you're addicted to real estate. I think you're super interested in it. And therefore, it's light work. It's easy for you
Yeah.
because it's not some Gordian's knot you're trying to untie and scratch your head out and try and figure it out. You understand it. You've got a podcast on the topic and you
Yeah.
constantly listen to other pretty high level people discussing real estate and you understand the nuance of what they're talking about. So I don't think you're addicted to real estate. I just think you're super interested in it. And I don't think that when is enough is really about a number or about a number of doors or about a certain amount of income. What it is for me, looking back at 53 with wife, kids, as you mentioned, for me is what is sustainable and what is not. I talked about W-2 earners earlier on that maybe in certain cases their destiny isn't always in their hands. What I absolutely love and I cherish it and I relish it about real estate is your destiny is in your hands. You're in total control. You're the one that decides if you're going to do that next deal. You're not in control of the day to day, the roof, the hurricane, the this, the that. They're the challenges, but overall, you're in charge of the macro outcome. What I love about real estate, it doesn't care what race you are. It doesn't care what gender you are. It doesn't care how old you are. It doesn't care what your skills are. It doesn't care what you used to know. It doesn't care what you used to do. It puts us all into the same playing field, right? And so you can be super smart, ex Wall Street analyst,
Yeah.
or you can be a house painter, but we're all in the same ring. And if that house painter is quicker, faster, and more plugged in than the Wall Street analyst, he's going to get the deal, or she. And so I don't think it's about wanting to stop. When is enough enough? What would you do? That's the question. Now, what would you do with your time? I think when I can tell you when is enough for me and what I've seen in the real estate world or in the world in general, in the business world in general. I can tell you, I can point to a lot of people where I'm like, you are doing more than you should be doing, right? And enough is enough when it becomes painful, when it becomes sad, when you start not taking care of your health, when you start losing interest in your family
Yeah.
or in your relationship with your spouse, or you're worried all the time, you're stressed out of your mind, you're shooting for these fictitious numbers. I was just engaged with a developer a couple of weeks ago. Very, very successful guy. I wouldn't exchange my personal situation with his in 1,000 years. He was to tell you that he was firing on all cylinders. He had hundreds of deals going on, hundreds of them, big multifamily townhomes, communities, subdivisions. He owned a construction company. He owned an architecture company. There's so much going on. And there was massive internal friction going on between all of his companies and all of this. Honestly, that was a question I asked him. I was like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing all of this? And he needed $8 million, like just right now. I need $8
Yeah.
million, and he's prepared to give away equity and prepared to do this. I'm like, no way. So I have told you, and we've discussed this at length, about the importance of doing things kind of slow and steady, fairly carefully, and just enjoy life on the journey. And so I don't have an enough. This is enough. I could be enough right now, but I enjoy what I do. I enjoy making this podcast. And I enjoy buying a few deals a year. But the moment I don't enjoy it, I'll stop. Right? The moment I don't enjoy it, And there's lots of times I don't enjoy it. There are lots of little times I don't
Yeah.
enjoy, but overwhelmingly, I really appreciate real estate for the things that I've just said. So when is enough enough? It's not greed that's driving me, right? It's not a number that's driving me. It's not when I hit 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, whatever the number might be to other people, or 1 million, whatever the number might be. That's not guiding me. What's guiding me is what I'm doing sustainable? Do I enjoy it? Am I being honest? And do I have high levels of integrity with myself and the people around me? And if the answer to all of that is yes, I just got to keep on trucking. And then the moment I don't feel that, I'll stop. So that's my when is enough. Clark, what say you?
I like you're saying that you talk about where it's not the person, it's not the journey, it's the person you become on the journey, right? And if you stop, right? If you retire, if you sit on the beach, then I think you kind of can lose purpose a little bit. I think that we thrive when we're moving. That could be metaphorically, that could be physically moving. When we tend to stop, then I think that we tend to potentially lose purpose in life and just in your direction and where you're going to go. But I think that when enough is enough, there's no right answer. And I agree with what you said about it's not a number. And at first you're like, well, I need to have $1 million or I need to have $5 million or 25 million, whatever that is. Like, that's not really where it is, because I'll give you an example. If you own a $5 million portfolio of real estate, or you have $5 million worth of equity in that portfolio, and then you have $5 million in the bank, right? So bucket A, bucket B. I will take the $5 million portfolio of real estate that kicks off 20 grand a month of income all day long over the $5 million in cash, right? Because you have that 5 million and now you've placed it into something that makes more money on top of that money, right? I've kind of evolved a little bit from not caring as much about some sort of money, goal in the bank, and more about, okay, how do I get to a point where, and again, I'm going to go back to the discussion I had with my brother where he said, well, how much money do you live on? Like, how much does it cost for you to live, you and your girlfriend to live on? And I was like, well, I think I have an idea. We'd like to think that we're very strict when it comes to businesses, right? You've got your CPA that you pay every year to do taxes. A lot of people have bookkeepers where you spend $500, $1,000 a month for them to give you a nice balance sheet, a nice profit and loss statement. And you're looking at all these and you're making sure that you're tweaking and not paying too much in this thing. But in your personal life, you have no freaking clue, right? Why not sit down and really have a fiscal understanding of what your burn rate is for your personal life for you to live, but you're not just excessively spending money, right? And then look at that and say, okay, let's just say it's 15 grand a month for, a family to spend. Well, how much money do you need to have to be able to have coming in? And I think a lot of people ask themselves that question, but I want to get to a point personally where it's like, okay, if my burn rate is, let's say, 10 grand a month, then I'd like to be able to be bringing in 25 grand a month, because I don't want to just stay still, right? I don't want to be bringing in 10 grand a month and spending 10 grand a month because I'm not getting ahead, right? So it's like, how do I get to a point where I can invest enough to where it can be kicking off enough, whether it's through some active work and some passive work, to be able to recycle. Let's say you're bringing in 20 a month and you're spending 10 of it, and that gives you 10K of income. Maybe you reinvest 6 or 7,000 of that, and then you keep a couple grand just for a rainy day. But I know for me personally, David, that it's going to be, once I'm more free in terms of being able to travel. It's a passion of mine. It's a passion of yours, to be able to be not quite tied as much to any one area, and I can kind of travel and I can spend 2 or 3 or 4 months in one place, still be able to log in and do everything I can remotely. That is when I will start to be able to feel like, okay, the dust is starting to settle a little bit. I don't need to feel like I need to push on the gas quite as much all the time. I'm not there yet. But in the next couple of years, I feel strongly that I can get to that point. And then I'll be able to sit back and smell the roses. And I want to do a part B to this conversation at that point. But I'm not there yet, David.
Right. So what you're telling me is it's not a number. It's not, your net worth that motivates you. It's
No.
cash flow. It's income that motivates you. And it's as passive as you can income
Yeah.
that motivates you.
Yeah.
So it's very important to understand, if you are carefully listening to this right now, if you are spending the money that you make from your income, right, from your, let's say, W-2 job, or even your business that's out there doing things right now, right? If you're spending that money each month, right, you're spending the wrong money, right? You need to be saving and investing every spare dollar you possibly can. You invest those spare dollars. In your case, Clark, and in my case, it's real estate. And other people's cases, it could be whatever. And those dollars that are now invested start to earn money themselves. And you can spend the money that the investments throw off to you, because that money will continue to come forever and indefinitely, if you're really working it or not. But if you're taking your earned income and spending it, the money stops right there.
Yeah.
If you're taking your earned income and you're investing it, and then the money that your investments throw off, you can start to spend that fairly free, because you didn't earn it. You're not spending your investable dollars, you're spending your free cash flow. And that is really how it works right there. So what I'm hearing here is that your net worth, the value of all of your assets, right, is great. That will stand to you later on in life. But the cash flow from your assets hasn't completely freed you yet. Now,
No.
we did an episode, ironically, I didn't think we were going to get here, but we did an episode on that, not a week ago, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so when is enough enough? So when enough, what I've heard from you, enough for you might be when your investments are throwing off, let's say, 30,000 a month, right? And it's fairly residual. Then you might let yourself, then you might not do the next deal.
Right.
Then you might not add the next portfolio, or meet the next architect because you're doing your next deal. So, and I've always said this, by the way, it's not really net worth that frees you. It's the income from your deals that frees you. So it's why I've never been a Bitcoin investor. Bitcoin doesn't throw off any cash flow.
Yeah.
It fluctuates. It can make you more money, which is great. If you're 25 and you've ridden Bitcoin and you bought $50,000 worth of Bitcoin and it's now worth $300,000, fair play to you. That's great. That's fantastic. But can you do it again? Can you do it again? Are you going to, reinvest in Bitcoin? Or like, when do you realize that? Now, Bitcoin will fluctuate. It'll go up, it'll go down, but you're still in the money. Good for you. But that money is not throwing off money. So you kind of have to take that $200,000, $300,000 that you made in Bitcoin and put it into something else. But that something else is probably not going to be another, rocket ship like Bitcoin was. The chance of you finding, several rocket ships in your life
Yeah.
are pretty slim. Not every, go find the next NVIDIA. You probably, if you do, you're not going to put enough money in it to ride it, because you're going to diversify and you're going to get more conservative, right? With the 300 that you made from your Bitcoin ride. And so that's not freeing money that you need to grow. If you need to grow the money, you're not financially free, right?
Yeah.
Financially free is when assets throw off income, and that income is going to come in on the first of the month every month, right? That's genuinely emotionally financially freeing, because you're like, I just paid $30,000 this month. I can go and I can go to France for a
Yeah.
weekend, and next month I can, $30,000 is going to come again. So that to me is really, to your point, enough is enough when you start to generate pretty good returns as passively as possible. And that's what I'm in the process of, augmenting or pivoting to in my career, in that, I've moved away from the really, really high volume fix and flip world, where I'm just out of the house at 6:30 in the morning and I'm back at 7 in the evening, That's not sustainable. I didn't enjoy that. So that was like working in a coal mine. Didn't enjoy that every day. And so kind of take a step back and kind of work more on adding inventory to my own portfolio. But to your point, that doesn't produce, and to the point of our podcast last week, you know, the cash flow from rentals is really, really not a great way to free yourself financially in terms of, you know, spendable monthly income next month.
Yeah.
It's a horrible way
Yeah, it is.
to live, certainly for the first 10 or 15 years of ownership. And so for me, and I think we made this point a few times, and I didn't know we were going to go to this, but for me, private money lending is a great way of knowing that you have 15,000 coming in next month, 20,000 coming in next month, because it's super reliable. There's loads of other ways. Invest in dividend stocks. Talk to your financial advisor. What would you do with a lump sum that can throw off monthly income? So what I heard you say was that the thing that is most financially freeing for you is not a number, but it's a monthly income that you don't have to work for. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that, and just listening to you talk too, I think that, it's funny how we think that this conversation is going to go left, and it usually zags right, throughout the conversation. But um, I think that the goal for me, and probably a lot of people, and probably you the same, David, is that how do we work toward getting income, right? We all need it. We all got to pay bills. That is as low as stress as possible. I know that when I'm asset managing my portfolio of rentals, like, it's really not that stressful. There's tenants that are complaining about this, or there's a fence down or that, but calling a fence guy is really not that difficult. It's not that, you get two or three fence quotes, you know one's 1,000, one's 1,500, one's 1,300, and your property manager is like, yeah, the one per 1,000, we've used them before, they're great, done. Like, that's not a very stressful situation to deal with. It's coming. It's not unexpected. It's not an unknown unknowns by any mean, right? I think my goal in terms of what is enough for me is, how can I work hard to be able to get to the least stressful way to
Yeah.
make recurring revenue, right? And it doesn't have to be $500,000 a month. Like, it doesn't have to be some huge number, because if I have low stress, that probably means I have more time, right? We tend to get stressed when we're working our ass off and you're working until 8 o'clock at night, right? That's stressful. Well, what's not stressful is knocking off at 2:30 and starting work at 10:30, right? That's less stressful. So I think that's my personal goal, is to continue to keep putting money into assets that I think are going to become less stressful for me down the road. So I want lower stress income, David. And so, when is enough enough? I think that if I is it's never going to be the line in the sand where, oh, David, now it's enough, I'm done, right? But it's like, if I can continue to see the progression of the quality of my income, rating that by the stress that it doesn't kick off, then I feel like that I'm winning the game.
I also think I want to add to this conversation the concept of what age you are.
Yeah.
Right. I haven't hidden the fact. My mom got early onset Alzheimer's, and she was diagnosed when she was 59 years of age. Right. Had a profound effect on me. Right. And when you start to really consider how much time you have, right? How much time you have, like time to spend with your kids, time to spend with your elderly parents, time to sit down with your folks, time for yourself, time to just go for a walk, at a real walk, not like I'm gonna fit in 20-minute power walk here
Wall
just to.
walk.
Yeah, I think maybe this is the European side of me. Money is not money is only a very, very small component of your overall well-being. It's very important to a point. There's no part of me that ever wants to live in abject poverty. That's just ridiculous, right? That's not what we're talking about here.
Right.
And I do see it, ironically enough, in what we do, in that we interact with people who haven't taken care of their shit, right?
Yeah.
And it's super sad. It's really like, how on earth have you ignored all of the warning signs or the stop signs, like stop this behavior, stop that behavior, this is going to end up bad? And so for me, I can see all the warning signs of what not to do in life, right? But equally, there's a lot of warning signs about what not to do on the way up as well. I see an awful lot of people in my career doing stuff for ego based reasons. They're doing it because they're in a mastermind group and they want to be as big as John. You know what I mean? They do this because somebody else is doing it. I don't care about what other people are doing. I really don't. I genuinely don't. I think it's very liberating to stop caring.
Yeah.
My ego is not attached to um, my identity. I don't have this, I'm a high frequency trader. That's who I am. Or I'm a fix and flip guy. I used to be a fix and flip guy. I'm not that anymore. You know, so I don't attach my identity to things. I'm very, very acutely aware of my age, right? I'm aware of what happens. You become slower. Disease and illness can come into your life. You don't know when it will strike. You just don't. You could be one of the lucky ones. You might not be. Could be anything. But open your eyes and look around. How many summers do you have left? Summers that you're going to be able to get on a plane and be able to walk the Camino de Compostela, be able to go to the Dolomites and go on those hikes and tracks. Because if you're just tearing through your summers, you just like, I will do that one day. But guess what? When that day comes, or if that day comes, you could be like my dad. My dad had all sorts of aspirations about his retirement until my mom was housebound at 60, 61 years of age. And he couldn't go anywhere. He couldn't do anything. He was caring for my mom, right? And so when you see that in the real world, right? I don't want to bring the tone down, but this is real, right?
Yeah.
And so when you see the older generation in front of us, and most of us listening to this are aware of what I'm talking about. You have an elderly parent, you've seen grandparents. Now it's your parents' kind of turn, if you will, and you see it's not that long to our generation, or my generation is just coming up behind it. So for me, enough is enough. Not as a binary on the 31st of January 2031, that's the day I'm going to be finished. It might be if I was a prison guard or was a cop. They know that my 30 years are up and my retirement is up on that day. That's a very, very different approach to retirement. But I think mine has been a kind of a wind, to your point, a wind down away from super stress, getting a little bit more sophisticated about where the risk is. I think if you look at things fairly long term, risk goes way, 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 way down. If you take no risk, your risk rises,
Yeah.
ironically enough. So taking no risk is riskier than taking risk,
Yeah.
ironically enough. And so if you measure just where's the balance there? Well, great neighborhoods are, in high growth areas, are always going to be desirable, right? There's not a huge amount of risk in buying a property in a great neighborhood that's super desirable, as long as it's manageable. And so for me, enough is enough. And it's come in fairly gradually into my life. It's not just this aha moment that happened all of a sudden. It's just, I realize that I can be more efficient if I do this. I understand debt by time by scale. We talked about that. I understand generally where things will be 10 years from now financially if I plant the seeds today. If you go out and plant a bunch of avocado trees in your front yard, you know that in 10 years, those avocado trees are throwing off a ton of avocados each, but it takes 10 years for that to happen. That's fairly reliable. You're fairly reliable. And so when is enough is enough? I enjoy what I do. I enjoy making this podcast. I enjoy buying a deal. I enjoy renovating that deal. I enjoy keeping my contractors busy. And so, in terms of when enough is enough for you at home, enough should be when, to Clark's point, when you have residual income from investments that comes in every month that you can kind of blow on a steak dinner, because next month there'll be another one. Next month is going to be another check. Next month is going to be another check. That's enough. When you have covered your expenses and you've got a little bit extra to do some nice things in your life, that to me is enough. It's not really the net worth. It's not the number. It's not the value of the assets that it takes to throw off this capital. The enough is enough for me is when I know my expenses and I can take in residually those expenses and then a little bit more so that I can go on vacation and take time with my family. So enough is also if I start missing the gym, if I start stressing out, waking up in the middle of the night, if I start waking up in a panic attack, if I'm stressed all the time, my blood pressure is going up, or I'm eating shit food. That's a way of me knowing I'm on the wrong track. So that's enough is enough. When I am getting time to myself, when I'm doing enough mentally to enjoy my day, real estate is a beautiful business because you never really have to retire from it.
Yeah.
And people really don't retire from it. They enjoy it. It keeps them plugged in. They're not going to get fired. Nobody can fire them. And so it's why we always see, the older folks at these RIA meetings. They're there because they enjoy it. They're not there because they have to. And they're not there because they're not multimillionaires, because they are. They're there because they enjoy it. And that's one of the big upsides to real estate. People overcomplicate it. People kind of rag on it. People do this, that, and the other. But the absolute joy of real estate is you don't really have to retire from it.
I love it. Give us feedback. I'm interested because there is no right answer. You just gave your kind of enough is enough. I think I kind of gave mine. I still don't really know. So I probably didn't answer the question very well because I'm in the thick of it as to when is enough enough. When do I need to put my foot on the gas? Do I need to kind of let off the gas? Do I tap the brake a little bit? I don't know. But at this point, I already know that I like stepping on the gas. It's fun. It's exciting. So, let's roll the dice and see what happens. But let us know what you think. Just know that you're not alone. Being an entrepreneur can be a very lonely business. And that's why I love having partners. That's why I love our business that we do together, because it does provide a little bit of collaboration. You're not the only one that doesn't know exactly in the timeline of life when you should be making the next big risk or the next sit on the sideline, right? There's no right or wrong answer. So you're not alone. But with that being said, David, I think that we've been able to kind of hit on this point. Anything you have to say before we'll take
I
everyone
do.
out?
Just as you're wrapping up there, I want to mention my good friend Rich Fetke, who's got to come on the show in a week or two. They've just written a new book himself and his wife, Kathy, who are very good friends of mine. And they've written a book called Scaling Smart. Scaling Smart. And Scaling Smart deals with this topic from start to finish.
Right.
You don't start off with a number. I want 10 million. You don't start off with I want to sell the business for $250 million. That's not your starting point. Your starting point is like, what do you want your life to look like first? And then you build a business around what that life looks like. And you should do the same with a job. You should do the same if you're thinking about buying a business. You should do the same if you're doing real estate, or you should have an analysis, no matter what you are doing, of you start off with what you want your life to look like, and then you build the income ecosystem around that, whatever that might be for you. I implore people to buy Rich and Kathy's book, Scaling Smart. And I wish I'd had an opportunity maybe to read things like that when I was younger. I'm very fortunate, Clark, in that I've seen it. And I think a lot of people, as we get older, we start to see it. So start off, when's enough? Build your life and visualize the life that you want to lead first, and then build everything else around it. And that's my summary of the conversation.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next time. See ya.
Thank you.
Well, that is a wrap for today, folks. We hope that this episode shed some light on the complexities of the real estate market and kind of really gave you some actionable insights. Because remember, you navigate the world of property investment, it requires more than just luck. You're going to need strategy, you're going to need knowledge, and of course, you're going to need a little dash of courage. And if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Leave us a review on any of the podcast platforms that you listen to and YouTube as well. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Burn Your Boats Wealth, and leave comments, talk to us about things that you want us to talk about or things you disagree with us on. We appreciate all that type of insight. Your support really fuels our fire to bring you even more valuable content. So we appreciate you. We appreciate the support, and we will see you next time.
You've been listening to the Burn Your Boats podcast with Clark Lunt and David Shaw. We would love to hear from you. Please reach out at burnyourboatswealth.com with comments, questions, and if you have a topic you would like Clark and David to discuss on an upcoming episode. We would very much appreciate it if you took the time to rate and review Burn Your Boats podcast on your favorite podcast listening app, and make sure to follow and share on social media. Content in Burn Your Boats podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not legal or financial advice. Please review our legal disclaimer at burnyourboatswealth.com. Thank you for listening.